If you turn your Bibles, please, to Leviticus, the 11th chapter, we've noticed where we could tell if we were a Jew what type of food we're to eat. And we've talked about the different animals that were unclean, ceremonially unclean, not necessarily talking about our health well-being, but sometimes they fall into those categories, and sometimes we think, well, that's why they're unclean. We're looking at, because God is holy, we had to be holy. We have to be today. But the Jews, it was the dietary restrictions upon them. We talked a little bit about what was the one evidence that indeed something you could partake of. You have to what? Part the hoof and do what? Chew the cud. We talked about that, and we talked about rabbits. And rabbits are, I've looked at that, well, maybe this hare, H-A-R-E, was an animal that chewed the cud like a cow does in those days. But as is pointed out to me, that a rabbit does eat previously digested food. It doesn't, the Hebrew word idea of scratching the throat. So a cow does that, 4 stomachs. Camel has 3 stomachs, and all those things. And they're not stomachs, they're chambers, where they have to digest their food again to get the proper nutrients. Well, a rabbit does a similar thing, but what it does, it eats its pellets, not the fetal matter, but the other, to get its nourishment. So if the Bible is chewing the cud, our idea of eating food that was previously digested, a rabbit would be in that category. A hare at that time would be one who was would be an unclean animal, because why? Not because they didn't chew the cud, but why? They don't part the hoof, do they? So we would not be partaking of that animal. But I want to just clarify, it was brought to my attention what rabbits do, and then I got sick when I found out what they did. And they're innocent. They're in their living room and they're eating their pellets, and everybody's happy, especially single women on YouTube. So we have those dietary restrictions. So let's get with question number 3. Seed was automatically unclean if a dead mouse fell on it. Is that true or false? It is false. Wonder if that seed had moisture with it. It'd be true. Why? Because we're looking at earthen vessels that are going to be, when we talk about leprosy in a few moments, that those vessels that were of clay and they're porous, they had to be destroyed. And the whole being is that some of these spreading diseases, some of these mildew, some of these things would penetrate a vessel like that. And so it wasn't brazen where it could be cleaned and with water. Or things washed with water, but if the seed was that way, if water was in a cistern, one fell in it, it still was going to be clean. But we think a dead mouse, that's filthy, isn't it? I'm not going to eat that oats, those oats that are there. But the idea of seed for sowing, it wouldn't be contaminated if that happened. So a dead mouse, if it fell upon it, if it's still dry, and it hasn't been, water has not been mixed with that, it would be clean. Question number 4, to touch a carcass of a clean and unclean animal made one unclean. Is that true or false? Verse 31, we read, these are they which are unclean to you among all that creep. Whatsoever doth touch them when they are dead shall be unclean until the even. And upon whatever any of them that are dead doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel, wood, or raiment, or so forth, the containers that is in. And then we look at verse 39. We see, if any beast of which ye may eat, so they're clean. These others are unclean. You can't eat them. But what if you could eat them? They are clean. He that toucheth the carcass thereof shall be what? Unclean until when? Until evening time. And he that eateth of the carcass of it shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even. And so that if he carries the carcass out, he's to wash his clothes. So there's whether it was a clean animal or an unclean animal, if it were dead, they were not to touch that. They would be unclean until the evening time. As far as time of uncleanness is concerned, what was the difference between having a male child or a female child? We enter into chapter 12. And this whole chapter is dealing with a mother giving birth. It could be a male child or a female child. What distinction do you see as far as time is concerned of her uncleanness? Now, there's a sense of ceremonially unclean. It's connected with the blood, childbirth, and her particular cycle as well, period, that she goes through every month. And we see a male child being born. So when you just look at which takes more to be ceremonially clean, have a baby girl or a baby boy? Baby girl, and it's double, isn't it? It's double. Instead of 40 days, it ends up being 80 days. And a lot of times it's because of the female and because of the hemorrhaging after a baby gave her more time. But indeed, those were things that were involved of showing, well, in the time of her impurity, in the time of that when the idea of giving forth a child, it wasn't sinful. It's out of ceremonially unclean before God. And God was teaching them this. And so what happened at the end of those days, they were to offer their sacrifices unto God, as he tells them here in these verse 6. So when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for a son or for a daughter, regardless of which one it was, she shall bring a lamb a year old for burnt offering, a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, on the door of the tent of meeting under the priest. So here's my relationship with God. Here's my idea connected with the tabernacle service. And then indeed that would be brought before them. And so we ask this question, number 6, what does chapter 12 and verse 8 tell us about Mary, the mother of Jesus? She had a what? A male child. There were two things going here. One that opens the womb, that firstborn belonged to God. You had to ransom that child. The firstborn male, indeed, was ransomed. If it was an animal and it wasn't ransomed, you break their neck. It belongs to God. And here's it says, but if it's a person, if it's a male child, indeed that was ransomed, and that, of course, those funds would go to support the priesthood and the things connected with the temple. So it's very much connected with the temple. But when she offers her sacrifice, what does she offer? Is it like this in verse 8 of Leviticus 12? If her means suffice not for a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons, the one for a burnt offering, the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and what? She shall be clean. Ceremonially clean, right back where she was in a relationship with God in the temple, and that was what was to take place. Well, what kind of offering did Mary make? A lamb? Or did she go the turtle dove route? What does that tell you? They didn't have a lot of money, did they? Jesus was born into poverty, and there's a sense that didn't have the funds suffice enough in order to offer that lamb as a sacrifice, but she obeyed the law. That family, Joseph and Mary, are a great example of family serving the Lord. They would travel miles to go worship when they didn't have easy car to go in, that sort of thing, the times that they lived in. And they would travel great distances for that. And they were always going to be doing things according to the law of Moses. So chapter 12, so we're dealing with dietary restrictions and things that show what we could eat, and the idea of we'll be unclean here, and a lot of that had to do with health consequences as well. God's wisdom is there as well. But in chapter 12, we see that difference between the male child and the female child as far as birth is concerned. And the doubling of the account was probably connected with it's a female. Here's the mother hemorrhaging from that. Her period may start, and there was time between the two. It wasn't the fact that having a girl is 2 times worse than having a boy. It wasn't that idea. And that's why you have boys. They're purified quicker. You can look at it that way, but that's not what we have it here in the Bible. But that ceremonially being clean before God, there's the things of childbirth, and those things were taking place. Now we get into chapters 13 and 14. And we realize that we're dealing with leprosy. 1871, a fellow found out, what is causing leprosy, and we think about leprosy is that when I get that, I'm going to die. It's a death sentence. Some leprosy was not as contagious as touching and you're going to be a leper, and that's why they went into camp. But there was contagious aspects of leprosy. But leprosy was a very general term. Psoriasis, it'd be all mold, mildew. We're going to have leprosy of the house, leprosy of the garment. Whoa, what is that? And the color of it. And what we're going to do, we have leprosy on the forehead of a bald man. And we see hair turning white. That's not a good sign. It needs to be black. We're seeing the leprosy of the boil that's there. And it was the idea of raw flesh, and there was leprosy that indeed would eventually cause you to lose your limbs, like a feeling, and you're not careful about those things. In a sense that it could be contagious. But leprosy is a very broad term, and you see it here in this chapter 13 about the leper. And there was a time where the leper was indeed something that you got cancer. It's a death sentence. And or we got scared about COVID. It's a death sentence. You're going to die. And all of those things, it becomes something of horror. And yes, it was serious, and yes, it could be contagious, and yes, you could die from that. They've done that. But over the years, we haven't seen that problem in our Western culture and so forth. They found things that are involved in why it's caused. But here it just could be psoriasis. It could be a skin disorder that spreads, and they were going to take care of that. And there was the leprosy, and there was the uncleanness that one would be in that particular situation. And what's interesting is that when they were to, we'll get to that as we go. So what is leprosy? You studied it just like you study rabbits, so what do you have to add to that? Leprosy being more of a general, when you read the scriptures, that's what I'm interested in. It takes a more general view. I can see leprosy of the house. How many of you have mildew in your home? And it's spreading the walls, and it gets serious, doesn't it? And what they would do, they would take the stones and take it apart when they realized, well, this is spreading. They would scrape the mortar off, take everything to an unclean place, and they rebuild the walls. If it came back again, they'd destroy the whole house again. They'd destroy the whole house. That's what they did when they had their issues of mildew, or the idea of those things that are growing. And it has this color, reddish, greenish, and that sort of thing. But it's just mildew, things that are spreading, and when that's happening, it could be serious, but they were going to take care of it. And really, what is the priest? He's not a healer, is he? He's an investigator. After a time, you say, well, I've got this. Well, we'll do this in 7 days. We'll check back with you again. It's not Dr. Priest, Dr. Aaron. You heal me. I want some medicine for this. No. Is the fact, is it going to be spreading or not? Continue to do so. And they were separated from that, and the idea of the spreading of that was very, very serious. So chapter 13 deals with that test of leprosy, and chapter 14 deals with the sacrifices one's to offer in one's relationship with God. So as we look at these question number 8, why was much time given to observe burnt places, as rash that's red and flaming, and that's leprosy, okay, that's and boils in the skin? Why was much time given to that? Well, let's look at verse 21 and 22. If the priest took it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and it be not lower than the skin, so it's not going deeper into your skin, that would be pretty serious, but be dim, it's decreasing in its color. Hey, I think it might be going away. Then the priest shall shut him up or shut them up for 7 days. If it spread abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him what? Unclean. It's spreading. This is something we're not going to let you be back into the relationship with the temple, with the people, nor are you going to be in relationship in the house. But if the bright spot stay in its place and be not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him what? Well, what medicine did he get to cure leprosy? He miraculously healed him. Didn't. It was a type of skin disorder that they wanted to pay attention to. And for 7 days, there's a sense of setting them apart, and then we'll check it out. And if it's not dimming in its color, that's not going to work. But if it's not going deeper into the skin, like you dig out those cancers, and you got to go deeper sometimes because they've been there, been working for a while, as we talk about, that's fretting leprosy. That's gnawing on the skin. That's going deeper than those things. Those were serious things to deal with in this broad category of the disorders of called leprosy. Now that's what we see in those verses. And the idea of a boil, verse 26 and 27, if the priest look on it, behold there, I think that's what I looked at. 21, 22, and then now 26 and 27. Verse 27, the priest shall look upon it the seventh day, and it is spread abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is indeed the plague of leprosy. But if the spot stay in the place and be not spread in the skin, but be dim, it is the rising of the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar of the burning. So there's the burning flesh. We speaks about the boils all there, that it's decreasing, it's going away. But all the leprosy of the boil, it's that general term, but the idea of spreading was very central, not going deeper. The color is dimming, but if it's not spreading, that was an important thing that we see was taking place. And that's why you had a time delay. You wanted to make sure, I think this may be it, end of it, but we want to make sure. All right, question number 8. We've talked about it. Now, question number 9. Was baldness considered unclean? I thought someone would fire real quickly on this one. Well, let's look at 40. If a man's hair be fallen off his head, he is bald. And what else is he? Yeah, he's probably cleaner than you and me with hair. He's clean, ceremonially clean before God. It was not a sign, that man is a sinner. That man, there's something wrong with him. But if his hair be fallen off from the front part of his head, that's frontal baldness, I guess. He is what? Forehead bald. That's how they would say it. He is forehead bald, yet he is clean. But if there be in the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white plague, it is leprosy, breaking out in his bald head or his bald forehead. The priest shall look upon him, and behold, if the rising of the plague be reddish white in his bald head, or if it is bald forehead, as the appearance of leprosy in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. The priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His plague is where? It's in his head. But baldness was not a sign of being unclean before God. But you could have those skin issues. And it could happen in the forehead. It could happen elsewhere on the bald head. So he deals with these situations as showing here's what is ceremonially clean before God. It's because you lose your hair that's not the problem. But these are things that are growing there. These are things that are showing up there. So a priest was an investigator. I guess you're a dermatologist without medicine. He just tells you your problem. and we're going to watch it for a while, and we'll see if it goes away. That's kind of what they did. But when it went away, they were there to offer the sacrifices. Where was the leper kept? All the days wherein the plague is in him, he shall be unclean. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. There's the idea of leprosy. It could be contagious. It could be something that could affect others. We'll put him outside the camp. Without the camp shall his dwelling be. And there was concern for the other. And the reason I say is, look at the verse preceding this. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, the hair of his head shall go loose, he shall cover his upper lip. And everybody in the community say, unclean, unclean. Is that way with it? He would cover his upper lip, and he's the one that says, unclean, unclean. He wore his mask so he would not contaminate others. It's a possibility. I got leprosy. And we have people, hey, you don't wear a mask, you're bad. We live in that kind of seriousness, but when the seriousness is, and that's not taking away the seriousness of COVID, but it's the idea that here is the fact, he is taking on that. He's outside the camp. So he would not contaminate others. And that's where he was kept until he was declared to be clean. Things weren't spreading. The color is dimming. It's not spreading in the house. It's not spreading on the garments. We see the test leprosy upon the garments as well. It's not spreading. And a lot of times you're going to burn your garments. If it's staying there and it's not going away, you're going to burn that. You're going to tear down your house. Even if you rebuild it and you took all the mortar off and you did what you could, you may have to take away that house because there's that spreading of the things that wasn't healthy. And that's God's wisdom. But that's where the leper was kept. And that's where we begin to realize, well, why would that be? And I think the context says of concern for others and their idea of the contagiousness of certain disorders that may be there. All right, number 11. In what two categories of events could you divide all the proceedings regarding the leper when the priest declared him clean? Look at chapter 14, because this is when the sacrifices are being offered. When you look at verses 1 through 8, we'll just pick up at verse 1. Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. So time has come by. It looks like the priest has declared him clean. The priest shall go forth out the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy be healed in the leper, then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 living clean birds, a cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop, and kill one of the birds. There's the hyssop and the scarlet, and all of that will be dipped, and even in the live birds can be dipped in the blood of that dead bird. All the ceremonial type things with the sacrifices that were to be offered. And so it was to be sprinkled upon them in verse 8. But verse 8 says, This is to be cleansed, shall wash, and he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes. He'll shave off all of his hair and bathe himself in water, and shall be what? Clean. And after that he shall come to the camp, but shall dwell outside his tent 7 days. So I've been in the camp, clean, shaved off his eyebrows. He shaved off all of his hair, all the body hair. He's bathed. But I'm going to be outside my tent. I will dwell outside my tent for 7 days. And it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave off his hair off his head and his beard and his eyebrows, even all his hair. So on that 7th day is when that would happen. And he shall wash his clothes, and he shall bathe his flesh in water, and he shall be what? He shall be clean. All right, all of those things are connected with me being outside the camp and not in my tent and not where I dwell. The rest of the chapter is dealing with my relationship with God's people in the tabernacle and my relationship with God among the people that are gathered together to worship God. And that's from those verses on, we see those things taking place from verse 9 following through I just put through verse 32. That you see the things connected with the temple. And so we pick up, and I talk about this fretting leprosy in verse 44. I was trying to we wouldn't have to read through all of the things that were there. But verse 32, it says, and this is the law of him in whom the plague of leprosy, who is not able to get that which pertaineth unto his cleansing. And Joel spake to Moses and said, when you're coming to the land, I will give you for possession. I will put the plague of leprosy in the house of the land of your possession, and so forth. And it speaks about the houses and so forth. But a lot of this was putting verse 21, he shall take one he-lamb, a trespass offering to be waived, to make atonement for him. So, and 1/10 part, that's if he's poor. So you have, and question number 12 says, what two offerings were offered by male and female? Well, that's not the one I want. They were offering burnt offerings and sin offerings, is what was being set forth. And we'll see that in the chapter 15 in just a few moments. But they were to offer a 10th part. Other times they were offering a higher percentage. They would offer, the priest in verse 16 shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in left. There's a mixture of oil and blood upon their ear, and their like the cleansing of the dedication of the priest and his toe. And those, we've seen that before. The live bird will be let loose, and all those ceremonies was the idea of the tabernacle and the idea of your relationship with these sacrifices. Now you are clean before God. So I dealt with my camp issue, my tent issue, my house issue, and now the temple, the house of God issue. And when you look at chapter 14, you can put the sacrifices and all this being done in that particular category that we're looking at. And so it kind of sums up in verse 2, this is the law of him whom the plague of leprosy, who is not able to get that which pertaineth to his cleansing. That's for the poor, whether you're rich and could offer the other sacrifices. Well, here again, we see the wave offering. Remember what the wave offering was? It's something that's showing dedication. And there would be that oil, the wave offering. I'm being dedicated back unto God and serving him. And there would be the sacrifices that are being offered. Verse 20, the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the meal offering upon the altar, and the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. Tabernacle worship, you can come now. And that could be something that indeed you will not die. You will be in a relationship with God as it ought to be. So there's your chapter 14. And then we come to chapter 15, and you have 4 areas of issues that come from the body, fluid issues that come from the body. For the male, it's a semen. For the female, it's her regular period, monthly period. But then there could be diseases coming from issues that come from the body for both the male and for the female. So you got 4 different things he addresses in chapter 15. That deal with bodily discharges. Now, how's that for a Sunday morning study? We won't dwell there, okay? You may have had some of those today, I don't know. But what were the 2 offerings during this time? Question number 12. What did you see? Because you offered these offerings unto God, and they were the burnt offering, and they were indeed the sin offering. But let's just get a feel, when a man hath an issue out of his flesh, because of his issue he is unclean. Just because of that, he is unclean. And he shall be an uncleanness in his issue, whether his flesh run with it to issue, or his flesh be stopped from the issue. Maybe something's not being able to discharge as it should. You got issues. It is an uncleanness. Every bed wherein he hath the issue lies shall be unclean. Everything whereupon he sitteth shall be unclean. Whosoever toucheth his bed shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water. He that sitteth on anything wherein that issue is, he shall wash his clothes. Verse 7, he that toucheth the flesh of him that hath the issue shall wash his clothes, and he that hath the issue, if he that hath the issue spit upon him that is clean, then he shall wash his clothes. And what the saddle soever. So wherever he sits, wherever thing that's being done, he shall be unclean, and that would take place. Also speaks about when there's the semen that comes, issues that come from, and the woman that lies with him. All of those things are taking place with showing uncleanness. Not that the body is unclean, not that the issues were unclean, but making it ceremonially unclean before God, and the touching of those things made that happen. Little details here, because we're going to get in when we get into Numbers, that of having sex with a woman during her period, you can be put to death. In Numbers, you're not put to death here. If the blood contacts you during that, it could be you didn't know that. So there's distinctive things that we'll see, and you read Leviticus 15, there's that they could offer a sacrifice and they'd be clean by evening. You're going to be put to death if you did that in Numbers, when you knew about it and you did such things as that. That would be something that would bring the death penalty to you. But here, it must be something different, that those things can happen, those accidents can happen, and they were to consider those things. A woman during her period, same type of thing would take place. So, burnt offering, sin offering, not necessarily the idea that you've sinned, but it's the idea I'm dedicating to God, and here I'm ceremonially cleansed. God is teaching us about His holiness, and that's the thing that we've got to remember. What was the divine purpose behind the cleansing of the fleshly discharges among God's people? Like we see in verse 31, thus shall ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness when they defile my temple that is in the midst of them. You die. And he wanted them to realize, I'm a holy God. And he wanted them to see this in these particular areas where, as they come to congregate, they need to understand it. And so these ceremonial uncleanness was important to God. And in verse 32, this is the law of him that hath an issue, and of him whose seed of copulation goeth from him. He's summing it up. So that he is unclean thereby. And of her that is sick with her impurity, there's her monthly period, and of him that hath an issue of the man and of the woman, they have other diseases that may come as an issue that, and he that lieth with her that is unclean, he will be unclean till evening, and so forth. When that happens, and we got another thing. When we study Numbers, we'll see that was another situation. So the details things are important to God, but this is the fact that I'm showing that the discharge, the fleshly discharges, bodily discharges, the idea of testing of leprosy, skin disorders, things that would spread, mildew and that sort of thing, the dietary restrictions, what you could eat and what you couldn't eat, is because I am holy and my people will be holy. A lot of the things to be done were done by the heathen, idolatrous pagans, and God's people were going to be different. And we can look at this and, well, I think that'd be a good diet going. That's real healthy that God did that. It's because I'm holy. I'm set apart from the gods. And we see it in these particular areas where God made us as far as the sexual relationship and how we're going to populate the earth and so forth, how we keep it populated. Those things are good in themselves. But it was an opportunity where a lot of that was not done and understood, and he wanted to show ceremonially before me because I am a holy God. And these are ways you're going to see that in your life. Now, I'm thankful that I'm a Gentile when I read Leviticus. But I love Leviticus. I hope you do. I read the other day that it's the least read book in the Bible. And there's probably a part of you say, I know why. Because we spend all of our time on it. It is something that we can learn and put ourselves back there. Yeah, we get used to these details. But it is something that shows the holiness of God. So if you get that from this section, because that would be that'd be all I could ask for. And you could eat your oysters, you could eat your catfish, and you could eat your pork, and all meats are clean now. And yet we're still be what kind of people? Holy, in all manner of living. Lesson 7, or lesson 8, Lord willing, we'll get there, and we'll be dealing with the Day of Atonement. And it will kind of run real well with our study in Hebrews. And that's something we can profit from as well. Thank you.